Hello everybody, and welcome to part 2 of Overlord without using minions to fight. Previously, we popped Melvin like a balloon, retrieved the Durium smelter from Heaven's Peak sewers, and exploded inside of Oberon, and we had made ourselves a pretty significant lead with everything we had done. Moving on, we need to go back to Heaven's Peak, but first we will go to the Dwarven lands of Golden Hills to run a few errands. And even before that, it's now time I get myself a proper Durium sword with my armor. And entering into the arena, since my armor grants me regeneration, I am able to survive the arena fights and thus make my first successful beetle harvest, meaning we can now bring our armor and weapons forces up to optimal levels. We start with a sword made entirely out of browns and also pop up the cap onto our armor as well, and with both in tow we can now harvest these creatures significantly faster. But all that being done, we meet our first of the dwarves, which are a little bit stronger than halflings, but not by much. As a matter of fact, I think even their halfling cooks have higher health than dwarven warriors. They aren't that big of an issue either way, even infinitely respawning in this little village, and we make sure to grab the mana object in this back corner. Also, these slugs started bursting out of holes.
I have no mouth, and I must scream.
We learn that the dwarves turn the elves into farm tools, and also discover that, much like the average stepfather, their health and attack damage increase by several times when they drink alcohol. I freeze these elves down at the side so they can help me fight, and by help me fight I mean watch the dwarves melt them down into biomass. And we get the optional quest to retrieve gold in a cave that's being guarded by Schnitzel from Chowder. But just in case I don't have the money for armor, we go ahead and go inside. A giant slug roleplays that one South Park episode, so we commit arson on it, and this entire cave is just glorified busy work, so we dash right through it. Consider feeding the elves to the slugma males, get our money, and leave. Outside the cave, we learned that we aren't the only ones who thought it would be a good idea to use fire on the boogers from the Mucinex commercials. We have to use minions to put bombs in front of this gate to blow it open, but since it isn't an enemy, it doesn't count. We have to immediately do it a second time too to get into the main stronghold, and then it introduces the warrior variant of the dwarf, which is the most anticlimactic fight ever, as my sword cuts straight through him like a katana going through a 9-year-old. And I proceed to reenact the average slasher movie, going around and chopping dwarves to pieces, only able to be halted by the Anti-Alcoholics Anonymous Club, who are actually able to stand up to me until their intoxication goes away. But after we get through the defenders here, we actually can't advance any further, due to requiring the Heaven's Peak story arc to be completed before we move on. I do want to grab some things before we leave though, namely the third upgrade of the Domination spell, allowing you to completely render an enemy submissive and breedable for as long as you feed it mana. If you're a corrupted Overlord, the spell instead causes the enemy to attack anything nearby. This won't help for most bosses, but with bosses where their damage is a huge factor, like Khan and the Succubus Queen, it might be useful. Back inside the city of Heaven's Peak, Aneurysm 4, I move through the city containing the Zen rabies, as well as saving the civilian from turning into a zombie by kicking him in the stomach so it animation cancels. Granted, I also tried to kick him into the fire, but it wouldn't let me. Anyways, we make it into the bar where this guy has a heart attack or something, and then a completely normally dressed person sprints out of the room. We follow them and are then faced with an army of over 100 rats. Moving a bit further in, we find out that a man in red is part of a clubhouse of terminal gooners who worship OnlyFans models and do things they're not supposed to with inanimate objects and sheep. We have a section where a minion has to turn a wheel, but I can't personally move over there. One of my red minions threw a fireball at him, so we knew it had to happen. We got it the second time around without issue, and entering into the next room, we learned that Sir William the Paladin was cheating on his wife with the Succubus Queen, and the Succubi were the ones who caused the zombie infection, as the disease can be transmitted sexually. Anyways, we murder the cultists while my minions turn the wheel. They die in one hit, so it's no big deal. And then approaching the room, we confront the Succubus Queen, who is basically the same as any other succubus, except she has more health and also an AoE stun attack that stuns everything except the Overlord. Ironically, this actually makes her easier than a normal succubus to fight alone, since the stun does virtually no damage. We also use the Domination spell to prevent her from attacking, but unfortunately she's actually stuck behind this barrier up on the top row because she's meant to get out of that spot when she flies down to go get a minion, so I can't really hit her that well. Thus, our really only fighting strategy against her is to just wait for her little flirt attack against me and stab her in the stomach with a sword while she's doing so until she dies.
And Marcus stabs the Locust Queen with a knife.
Back outside, one of my red minions throws a fireball at a zombie, because of course he did. We make a quick detour to go beat up the human centipede clansmen so we can use the tower beacon there, and afterwards they start worshipping us. I also do a little clear out job for this mana object, grabbing it too, as I'm having an inkling suspicion that we will need every mana object for the late game. We confront Sir William at his palace with more Gunner cultists. He reveals that they were once his ally, but he left us for dead in the tower, and we start stabbing his party members to death while he's talking to us, but before eventually beginning the fight with him. Now, with decent armor, Sir William's is actually not a hard fight at all without minions, and I actually prefer to fight him without them, as with all the cultists running around and the minions just causing unnecessary clutter, plus he has no barriers aside from his knockback, and you can even knock him back yourself without even having to put blue minions in your weapon. So we easily knock him out of the first phase of the attack, and chase him down the hallway where we have to fight two more of his side pieces. Ironically, these two succubi with their high damage and potential knockback pose more of a threat to me than Sir William himself. But that's also what the shock shield is for, and I can just stun down one of them easily, turning the fight back into a 1v1 and killing her the same way I killed her mother. Sir William, like the average drug addict, blames the wizard for what he did here, and then we go to his second phase of the fight, where he doesn't actually really change his strategy or fighting style, except teleporting around a little. The cultists are no threat to anybody, and he honestly fights kind of like a succubus too in the sense of knockbacks. But due to his sporadic and sort of long wind-up nature, he isn't really a hard fight without minions, as he just doesn't have what it takes to damage me enough in time. Anyways, he sets himself up for a finisher after I beat the crap out of him. I oblige, he explodes for some reason, and just like that, we're done with Heaven's Peak. Before we leave, though, we have to choose between Rose or her sister Velvet, who was originally the one to marry Sir William before he dumped her for an OnlyFans succubus. Her breasts breasted breastily, but unfortunately the minion upgrades both of them give me have no effect on this challenge, and I am a pious man who cannot be strayed from the path of insect and Xenos supremacy. So in addition to choosing Rose, I bought all of her decoration items just so it would unlock the romance scene with her, then proceeded to not do it and ignore her for the rest of the playthrough.
Mistress Rose is not a lady to be kept waiting.
We go to the Elven Temple slave construction site thing, where this elf roleplays as a communist and then starves to death, and we get to work moving through the construction site. There are these giant pillbug rock monsters rolling around who can pull down most things, but like the skull boar, have a very high wind-up time, meaning you can often slay them after a single volley. We have to murder several of them while making our way through these lanes, and they're more so annoying than anything else. There's also a few alcoholics in these passageways as well, so we have to spend a few minutes clobbering them. Nothing of importance happens until we get to Schnitzel guarding the tower again, but this time we have the option of using the Pillbrug rock creatures to fight him instead, so I just go about smashing each of the barriers, allowing them to crash into him, and before I know it, the giant is no more. We stop a bunch of minions inside the animatronic statue, and then the beholder teleports it back to the kleptomaniac's home base, and back outside we neutralize the perimeter guard, leading into the dwarf fortress and into the brewery, and once we get inside we start doing the typical slasher thing, and murdering everyone we see. We get the last shield upgrade too, even though we don't really need it. My main strategy for dealing with the dwarves here is just murdering them before they can get to the alcohol. That becomes slightly problematic when we get to these lever parts where I either can't cast Confusion or I can't cast Fireballs either to prevent the dwarves from hitting the minions. And since the levers don't have a visible target marker, it's more likely that a minion does accidentally attack the dwarf instead. I can't hit both of the first dwarves that come out fine with Fireballs, however after you hit the lever, two more dwarves come out who you need to take down in order to advance, but they're both protected by the lever's hitbox. The solution to this would be using a minion to lure the dwarves over without attacking them. However, if the minion stops even once, he'll probably defend himself. And this is a mistake I made, well, a handful of times, as the minions just could not resist fighting back as lures. Eventually, after the third or so try, I got a red minion who's notoriously low health, and just let the dwarves kill him before he can hit back, putting them in a spot where I can burn them, and then I can advance on after stabbing the other dwarves in front of me from the open doors. But at that, we finish the wheel and turn it, opening the doors to the other side of the mountain. We could get lower and get the beer keg too, but since that only buffs minions, we can leave it in its entirety. And after exterminating the perimeter guard from the doors, we're done. Outside, we have only 2 remaining quests before we're fully done with the Dwarven domain, and the first is the Arcanium Smelter side quest. I don't predict that I'll need the Arcanium armor, but I could be disproven. I definitely wanted the sword though. Anyways, I start this quest the same way I normally do it, which is immediately go backwards into the slug nest, slashing my way through them enough times, and moving until the slug queen spawns. I start my fight with it by setting it on fire, because I really just don't want to kite it all the way, but I didn't have enough mana to actually get it on fire, so we kite until I remember I have little to no health left after slashing through all the other slugs, and thus I devise a different solution. Coming up with the Megablane idea, I lured onto the smelting fires for the other part of this objective, moved, it actually used the machine to burn it alive, causing it to die instantly, and permanently turn off all of the slug spawners. Meaning, once I get rid of the dwarves now, I should be able to effortlessly get the smelter out of here. Speaking of which, I nearly get burned alive by a flamethrower, and I also make sure to get the final level of the fire spell after clearing out all the beetles. But afterwards, it was basically completely smooth sailing from there, and I got both the smelter and the combustion spell out of there, which is basically a massive AoE fire blast. Outside, one of my minions hit a beetle. We all know what has to happen next. But moving on from that, and safely getting my minions through, we enter the final leg of the Dwarven arc, being Goldo's stronghold. The initial battle is not too bad, even though I got a bit overconfident at the top, and lost my first fight against them because a flamethrower burned me again. So we just walked back calmly. Never mind, one of them attacked a sheep. Anyways, after this glorified busy work, we finally make it inside of Goldo, the hero's stronghold, and I immediately get to work tricking the Dwarven flamethrowers into blowing up their dwarf fortress. This doesn't take too long, nor do I even think this is required to progress, but I do it anyways because vandalism. After we sufficiently satisfy the game's bloodlust, we finally get to meet Goldo, who upon seeing us immediately leaves the room in order to only come back on his tractor. And this fight is somewhat similar to the Melvin fight, with the exception of the front of the tractor will damage you no matter what you do, and it also happens to shoot fire out of the front of it too. Fortunately, neither one of these things are endgame deal breakers for a fight, and we can damage it just fine with our sword as well as our spells, only really missing out on the bombs that we can't use, but thanks to our durium armor, I think we even beat out the clock on this thing compared to Melvin. Anyways, after we fight a little bit harder, Goldo's outside of his Mecha Man suit and it explodes. I let him get a few courtesy smacks in before I violently devour him, and then just like every other boss, he explodes for no reason, with the only other decision we have to make here being to either save the gold or the female elves from the crumbling dwarf fortress. Since I have been a bit mean through this playthrough, even if my corruption is low, I decide to let the elven women live, letting them repopulate their race and give them a future for their kind. Which is what I would have said if I didn't immediately go to Evernight after I freed them to kill them all myself.
It's not about money.
Just have to kill a lot of people!
That meme is a bit of an oxymoron because high elves aren't people. Anyways, moving on, the minions we stuffed inside the statue finally found a place with cell phone service and are able to calm me down, and just like that, we're now inside the Raboreian Desert, the last of the 5 domains in Overlord. There are predictably Raboreian raiders everywhere, as well as beetles. For some reason I feel as though all beetles in the Overlord universe originated from Raboria. Whatever, this game is almost 20 years old, I'm not making a theory on it. Anyways, personally, the desert is my least favorite of the domains. Not due to the aesthetics or anything like that, I don't even mind the other enemy types. However, one thing that annoys me incredibly about the desert is these goddamn giant sandworms. They follow the same logic of Half-Life antlions getting pissed whenever you step on the sand.
Stop where you are! Stay on the rocks! Don't step on the sand! It makes the antlion...
They do a comically high amount of damage, and they're very accurate in their attacks as well. And as you can see with my sword, unlike with the giant snakes, I can't do any direct physical damage to them myself, and there's only one way to get rid of them, which you'll see soon enough. Anyways, we meet the next predicament for the challenge in the form of these blaster bugs. Basically, blaster bugs are living bombs that explode when they die, allowing you to break barriers with them and advance onwards. Normally, you are supposed to use a minion to lure it over to a location using one of the beetle's larvae, and then explode them on the barrier. And although I don't think that destroys the challenge or anything like that, we can actually at least get past these parts without using minions anyways, simply by going next to one of their holes and casting confusion on them, and then pushing them to the spot we need them at before exploding them, and just like that, we can advance only to see that the well-spoken Jewel now knows that we're here. We break down the door cool guy style and systematically slaughter every single one of the raiders she left down here. This was both an admiration of their new dart abilities as well as revenge for barely being able to take more than 2 of them at any given time. And immediately after we break down the barrier and chase after Jewel. Advancing onwards, we also partially clear out the area around the health disc, and I'd not forgotten about the mana disc back next to the other worm either, but we need a way to safely get it away from them first. Fortunately, a sheep was happy to oblige with our request, and I also work rather well as bait myself, which bought the minions more than enough time to deliver it, and I doubled down with the mana object up in the starting spot. After we grab those, Jewel reveals that she can jump like a Jedi Master, and we have to take a detour in order to get her. Yeah, we go through a small village, murder everyone there, blah blah blah. But in the back of the village, we get to another semi-problem, as the blaster bugs are on the other side of these bones, meaning we have to use a minion to draw them out. Okay, well, that's no problem in itself. However, there's also a sandworm back there, and if the sandworm eats 2 blaster bugs, it dies. This is great news, but the problem is if the blaster bug being there is caused by a minion, that means the minion technically made the attack. This basically means I need to coax a blaster bug out of its hole with a minion before moving it over to a spot where the worm will eat it myself, and then lure the blaster bug's bones onto the other side while also taking them out with one of my spells to make sure I'm the only one who did any damage. So I started my experiment by picking up the egg and leaving it at the edge of the rocks. Unfortunately, the sandworm can detect the blaster bugs on the rocks a fair amount too, so we knew it had to happen. Then, afterwards, my next strategy was to not pick up the larva at all, and simply move a minion down to trigger their spawning before using my confusion spell, and after a few moments we had success. One of the blaster bugs willingly walked on the sand and we could destroy the worm this way. So I walked the minion back down and then he attacked one of them because I'd stopped for 1 second. Well, we all know what has to happen now. Okay, one more time with a brown minion instead. He's less likely to jump after them. So, go down, get their attention, do the confusion dance, worm strike number 1, loading beetle, correct strike. Second round of distraction, the confusion spell takes a little bit longer to push the Oogpister beetle onto set, but when it does, it blasts. And just like that, no more worm. With our last requirement of help from the minions being to drag a larva over to the bone wall, and from here I can cast my fire on him and finally ascend us past this part.
An Oogpister beetle. Straight into real danger.
But with the barrier open, I can finally go in, and I can even do the last wall myself with a little bit of coaxing, though it does take a minute or two. And moving in, I can continue my comical rampage, and we get the full taste of the second flavor of Raboreians who just hurl fire grenades right at my face. Although they stun me, they do significantly less damage than what you would think. Anyways, they have even less health than a standard raider, and they aren't even immune to fire either, despite being on fire. Getting into town, I immediately sprint to the back tower portal so it saves my progress, then afterwards we immediately go back, and we can also listen to some very painful voice acting.
Can't imagine why. It's an ugly-looking thing.
We get started for the jewel capture by going around her little village and stabbing and slashing all of the Raboreian raiders, who I can only hope are her friends and family. It's important we get the entire village cleared out of any stragglers too, before I begin, as to make sure none of my minions attack or get attacked during the capturing process. While I'm doing this, as you might have guessed, Jewel isn't a boss fight like any of the others. Rather, she's not a fight at all, and her character isn't even really an entity with health or damage either. She's actually just a map object that responds to movement. And our goal here is to push her into the tower portal so that I can teleport her back to the tower and capture her. But since she responds to the character movement, you are supposed to place minions around the exits and entrances so that she has nowhere to go, and once she's fully blocked off, she has no choice but to run into the portal. This doesn't take too long to set up either, nor does it violate the challenge. As I've stated earlier, this isn't really a fight at all. There was also the matter of the statue. Basically, 2 elves show up and try to take it back if you drag it back to the castle, and you can either give it to them or take it for yourself. But honestly, I couldn't even be bothered to break the beetle while blocking it off at this point, so we just leave it, and then we head back to the tower. Anyways, we interrogate the voice-acting kleptomaniac thief hero, Jewel, and she tells us that the wizard, the other hero, paid her to steal the statue. Not sure why though, or why Gnarl insisted we captured her, but after we learned that, we also see that Jewel has a boyfriend, or friend-zoned guy, it's never fully established which one he is, and since we kidnapped her, he's going on a nice guy who hit his limit spree, and terrorizing and enslaving the domains that I myself have conquered so far. But with only the nice guy and the wizard left to conclude our journey in the final episode, to see if you can actually beat Overlord in its entirety without using minions to fight at all, I decided to call it here for this episode to keep a little bit of the suspense. How tough is Khan the nice guy going to be, and what do I plan on doing for the wizard in the final battle? I have answers for both of these things, though I'm not sure how good of answers they are. But if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, please leave me a comment down below letting me know your thoughts as well as what you'd like to see next, both Overlord and otherwise. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing, as among my channels I upload new long-form content every week, as well as new shorts every other day encapsulating variety content, including challenges, guides, memes, audience participation, playthroughs, and even theories. Also, join the Discord with the link in the description, as well as the pinned comment to become part of the show. But with all that being said, thank you all again so much for watching, and big thank you to all my channel and Patreon members, and I will see you all next time.